Well, good day, class. Welcome to our lesson for the subject of HUM4S, or the Introduction to World Belief, Religion, and System. Okay, I will share the screen to you. Lesson 4, Judaism, PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so you already know about the introduction of the world religion, the historical beginnings of the basic religion, and the power of the religion. So we will now discuss the first type of religion, which is the Judaism. Okay, for the history, Judaism is one of the oldest world religions. People who follow the Jewish religion are called the Jews. The Jewish religion started in the country of Israel around 1812 BC during the Bronze Age. It began when God promised Abraham he would protect him and his descendants and give them the land of Israel. In return for this, they promised to obey God. So the Torah, it is the main religious book used by the Jewish people. So this Torah is um, one of the important book or the sacred book that was used among the Jewish. Okay, another is that people who are non-direct descendants of Abraham but entered the covenants, for, such as they convert to Judaism. They are called the sons and daughters of Abraham. So in this picture, it shows that people who converts to Judaism, so there's the family of this young boy or the parents. So in order to convert his religion, like for example in the Judaism, this boy now is called the sons of the Abraham. Okay, for the beliefs of the Judaism, so the Jews believe that there is only one God. So meaning to say, one God that is an the example of monotheistic religion. And that He created the universe. So loyal lang sa isang God, that there is a belief that siya lang din yung gumawa ng entire universe. Also, Jews believe that everyone can have an individual and a personal relationship with God. So, there is an equal relationship or belief with God. Could be an individual or you, me. So, we all have this relationship with one God. And also, they believe that God continues to work in the world, affecting everything that people do. So there is only one God that would guide or would continue to work in this entire world that affects all the happenings or all the doings of all the people. Okay. Important people on the Judaism. So we have here Abraham. So he is the father of the Jewish people. So the Jews see Abraham as a symbol of trusting and obeying God. So si Abraham, siya yung unang tao na may pananalig at sinusunod yung God, which is also the father among the Jewish. He is also important to the followers of Christianity and also in the Islam. So dalawa yung importante siya na follower sa Christian and sa Islam. So the story of Abraham is told in the book of Genesis in the chapters 12 to 5. So from the Bible or from the book of Genesis, sinulat doon ang story ni Abraham sa chapters 12 to 25. Also, another important people is Moses. So Moses is also an important figure as he gave the Jews the Torah around 1250 BC, in which the Torah contains the laws of God. So ito yung hinawakan ni Moses, which is like a rock that also contains the laws of God. So the first laws of God are those 10 commandments, right? So he's also the leader who freed them from slavery in the Egypt. So 'di ba, yung sa powers of religion na tinakal ng Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So yung slavery also happens on that time. So si Moses yung nag-free sa mga tao or siya yung nangunguna or siya yung nangusog na mag-free sa mga tao na naka-experience ng mga karasan or this slavery sa bansang Egypt. He also protected the Jews from the wrath of God and negotiated with God on their behalf. So, with his strong prayers, pinoprotektahan niya yung lahat ng Jews, and then nag-negotiate din siya kay God na may malaki din siyang or may malakas siya na belief sa kanya. Okay, the sacred texts in the Judaisms are the Torah. So ito yung sacred religious book nila. Also, we have here the poetry and then the Talmud. So Torah, that means to teach. It considered as the most important text and composed of 5 books of Moses, as well as the 613 commandments or the mitzvot. A Torah is written on a scroll, as you can see here in this picture, that is wound around 2 wooden posts, which they call this a Sefer Torah. And it is written by a sofer or a scribe who must copy the text perfectly. So the Hebrew text of Torah is considered by Jews as a holy down to the last letter. So ito yung itsura ng Torah. So the 5 books of Moses. So we have here the Genesis, Exodus, the Numbers, the Leviticus, and then the Deuteronomy. So Genesis is also called as Bereshit. That means in the beginning. So this book talks about the creation of the world. So the great flood also happens on this, and the stories of Judaism's patriarchs and matriarchs. So Bereshit begin with Abraham and Sarah and end with Joseph in Egypt. So ito yung pictures that happens on the Genesis. So in the beginning, diba? So you can see here from this picture. So there's a plant or there's a sprout or growth of this tree. So that means life would begins. Next, number 2 is the Exodus or the Shemot. That means names in Hebrews. So this book tells story of the Israelites' bondage in Egypt, their journey to Mount Sinai. So yun siya, di ba yung historical beginnings of the religion niya, yung Mount Fuji, that is important in the Buddhism, and Mount Olives is a Christianity. So Mount Sinai is very important in this Judaism. It is where the 10 commandments are received. So this means Exodus is names. The 10 commandments was made. Number 3 is the numbers or the Bamidbar. Bamidbar means in the wilderness. So in Hebrew, this talks about the Israelites wanderings in the desert as they continue towards the promise of land. So as you can see here from this picture, there's a group of Israelites that are wandering in the desert and they continue towards this promised land. So that happens on the numbers. Number 4 is the Leviticus or the Vayikra. So this means, and he called. In Hebrew, this book deals mostly with priestly matters such as rituals, sacrifices, atonement, and the ritual purity. So as you can see here from this picture, so there uh, are some priests. It is wearing the white clothes, in which they happen to do some rituals, a sacrifice, atonement, and also a ritual purity. And lastly, is we have here the Deuteronomy or the Devarim. That means words in Hebrews. This is the final book of the Torah. It recounts the Israelites' journey according to Moses and ends with his death just before they enter the promised land. So this is what happens on the Deuteronomy, to the final book of the Torah. Next one is the mitzvot. That is composed of 613 mitzvah or the commandments that relate to Jewish observance and religious practice. By being faithful to the 613 commandments, the Jews manifest their fidelity to God and translate the Torah into these actions. So mitzvot could also be called as this Torah, di ba? The Jews believe that the mitzvot simply entails a more intense responsibility from them since they are the chosen people of God. And the mitzvot, there is intense responsibility because yun nga, sila yung pinili ni God, or they are the chosen people to lead the people. Okay, the Tanakh. Tanakh is an acronym that refers to the canon of the Hebrew Bible. The acronym is formed by the first Hebrew letter of each of the Masoretic texts, three traditional submissions. So the meaning of Tanakh is Torah, Nivim, and Ketuvim. So Torah, that means teaching. Nevi'im, Nevi'im is prophets, and then the Ketuvim is writings. So these books, the books of the Tanakh were passed on by each generation and according to rabbinic tradition, were accompanied by an oral tradition called the oral Torah. So that means the Tanakh. Next one, so we are done in the Torah. So the next importance of in this Judaism is the poetry. So we have here Piyot. Piyot is a Jewish liturgical poem, usually designated to be sung, chanted, or recited. During the religious services, it is a traditional table prayer, but can also be chanted at the onset of the Shabbat or the Friday evening. So this is a prayer during Friday evening. This uh, piyot or this poetry, a chanted onset on that Shabbat. So the piyutim is a Jewish liturgical poems that have been written since a temple among temple times. Most piyutim are in Hebrew or Aramaic, and most follow some poetic scheme, such as an acrostic following the order of the Hebrew alphabet. Okay, next is the Talmud. So the oral Jewish law was written down at the end of the 2nd century by R. Judah Ha-Nasi, which was called this Mishnah. The discussion of the Mishnah were also put to writing, which was named by Gemara. The Mishnah and Gemara together are called the Talmud, which is the body of Jewish civil and ceremonial law. So ito yung example na itsura ng Talmud. That is together with Mishnah and Gemara. Next is the doctrines in the Judaism. Jews worship and study the synagogue. In the synagogue, Jews hold religious services, which includes the prayers and also the readings from the Torah. So in the religious services, it is led by the rabbi who is assisted by a cantor. So the major body of Jewish law is found in the Torah. So yan yung religious book nila, which is supplemented by the oral law and the interpretations of this law. There are 613 commandments included in the Torah, which also includes the 10 commandments. So, but these 613 commandments govern Jewish law, covering areas as philanthropy, sacrifices, prayer, ritual purity, dietary laws, and observance of the Sabbath, and other holidays. So the Jews believe that the Ten Commandments are the first 10 of the 613 commandments, di ba? So yung pinaka-importanting 10 commandments na familiar tayo. So that was given by God to the Jewish people, and they are the foundations of this Jewish ethics, the behavior, and the responsibility. So the Jewish law or the kashanot requires that the Jews may not eat certain foods like this pork, a certain seafood, or a food without a blood removed. Also, some dairy and meat products such as milk may not be consumed at the same meal. Jews follow a strict rule on how to slaughter animals since a shochet or a religious Jew who is duly licensed and trained can kill an animal to make it kosher or a food that conforms to kashrut. So yun siya, diba? Judaism is really strict in eating some of their foods, so in slaughter animals. So may professional talaga na religious Jew na papatay sa mga hayop or sa mga any other animals, di ba? Because they could see that they're also sacred, di ba? Sa animistic na theory that animals are also good in the religions. So yun siya. They are also um, very strict among foods. Unlike if it is a vegetable lang, di ba, or gulay, is okay lang yun siya. Another one is regarding to the religious calendar and festival. So the Jews follow a lunar and solar calendar to set the dates of these holidays. So for example, the dates of the holidays and festivals are determined a lunar calendar, which is based on the phases of the moon, diba? Because lunar eclipses are focusing on the moons, the sun and the earth. And the Jewish Sabbath and the holidays traditionally begin at the sunset and the evening before the day of the Sabbath or a holiday. So the pious Jews do not perform any work on Sabbath and they devoutly spend their time in prayer and religious study. So yun siya, di ba? Dinadisregard nila yung mga business nila or busy sa kanilang work because it is very important to prioritize your faith or your soul in the prayer time or some religious study. Also, the practice of Judaism is intimately linked to the life of Jews. Male Jewish children are circumcised on the eighth day after birth as a sign of the covenant between Abraham and God. It is also on that day that his name is given. So as you can see here from this picture, so there is uh, Jewish children that was circumcised 8th day after birth, di ba? So wow, kawawa naman itong bata na wala pa siyang sa mundo and then na-circumcised na din siya. But they are on this belief, di ba? So we should respect them. When Jewish males also reach at the age of 13, they are already considered now as adults and can participate in a special religious service called the Bar Mitzvah. So as you can see here, this 13-year-old boy uh, or participating in this bar mitzvah because yun nga sa kanila is 13 is adult na sa kanila, unlike sa atin if if you know who is 13 is parang pagbukisyo both di ba sa tua or first teenager years pa yan siya 13 to 19, so yun siya. Okay, next is when Jews decide to get married, they participate in a ritualized wedding ceremony, and a sign of ketubah, which outlines the rights and responsibilities of the groom in relation to the bride. So you can see here, a ketubah in the ritualized ceremony. So the responsibility of this male or this groom in relation to this bride. Next, upon the death of a Jew, the body is ritually washed and placed in a coffin for burial. Loved ones can observe a seventh period of mournings called the Shiva, at which time religious services are held in the home of the bereaved. So as you can see here, this uh, death of Jewish people called the Shiva on the seventh period of their mourning. Yan siya. Next is God. So God's name is so holy that Jews are forbidden to utter the four-letter name of God, which is YHVH. So YHVH. Instead of pronouncing the YHVH during the prayer, Jews may also says Adonai. So it is a common practice to restrict the use of the word Adonai to prayer only. In conversion, many Jewish people will call God or Hashem, which in Hebrew the name, or many Jews also write G-D or underline D. G-D instead of this God. So we have here the YHVH, the four-letter name of God. Okay, for the sects, we have here the Rabbinic Judaism. So it is characterized by the belief that written Torah cannot be correctly interpreted without reference of the oral Torah, and the literature that specifies which behavior is allowed by this law. However, by the late 18th century, the Jewish Enlightenment resulted to the division of the Jews from the North America and other English-speaking countries into the Orthodox, the Conservative, and the Reform Liberal Jews. So that is the first sects in the Judaism, which is the Rabbinic, in which it is cannot be correctly interpreted without the reference of the oral Torah, di ba? So yung sacred or their religious book na sinusunod nila sa kanilang law. Okay, for the Orthodox Judaism, it holds that both the written and the oral Torah were divinely revealed to Moses. Thus, the laws within it are binding and changing. So it is always changing and binding about their oral Torah and the written. They also place a high importance on the Slosha Asar Ikarim, or the 13 fundamental principles, which was compiled by Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, or the Maimonites. So ito yung mga important church people conducting their Orthodox Judaism. Another one is the conservative Judaism, so characterized by commitment to a traditional Jewish laws and customs coding the observance of this Shabbat and Kashrut, and a positive attitude towards a modern cultures. So we have here these Jewish people having or conducting their conservative Judaism, the Shabbat and the Kashrut. This means that the followers of the conservative Judaism accept both the traditional rabbinic and the modern scholarship of the Jewish religious texts. It is anchored in the belief that the Jewish law has always developed in response to changing conditions, and they assert that the written and the oral law may be interpreted by the rabbis to suit the needs of the Jews in these modern times. So meaning to say, this conservative Judaism, they both accept the traditional rabbinic and also the modern one of the religious context. because they believe or they develop in a response to this changing condition, di ba? Because from the past is wala pang technologies, and then on this modern type is we are more engaging on these technologies, but they also have this religious beliefs. Next, the Reform, Liberal, or the Progressive Judaism. It is the adherents to Reform, the Liberal Judaism, the view of Judaism as a religion rather than a race of their culture. They reject most of the ritual and the ceremonial laws of the Torah, but they observe these moral laws and strive to live in these ethical lives. So, mas inobserbahan nila yung mga moral laws na kakailanganin nila. And also, they strive to live this ethical lives. So, ano yung tama at saka ano din yung mga mali. So, this according to the progressive Judaism. And for the issues of Judaism, so first is the prejudice. They is preconceived opinion that is not based on a reason or the actual experience. Like, for example, this young girl showing her looks, di ba? Parang minsan, uh, may mga ibang opinion na narinig tayo na ganun nga yung sa belief or religious belief natin is parang kino-compare natin sa kanila. So dapat we should really accept them kasi nga yun yung belief nila. Next, the anti-Semitism. The Semitic people or the Semites refer to any members of any of the number of peoples of the ancient Middle East, including the Akkadians, Assyrians, Arameans, Phoenicians, Hebrews or the Jews, Arabs, and their descendants. So ito yung mga itsura ng ibang mga um, uh, people who are in the Judaism na religious belief. So minsan 'di ba may iba na very kakaiba talaga siya yung mga sinusuot nila na tabon lahat. Minsan na may natatakot or parang curious sa kanilang suot. So we should really accept them because we are unique. So iba-iba tayo ng beliefs. Another is this anti-Semitism has been understood as prejudice of people against Jews simply because they are Jewish. It might seem illogical and unreasonable, but the prejudice against the Jews have actually resulted to the loss of the 6 million Jewish lives from 1941 to 1945. Jews were targeted and methodically murdered by these German Nazis. As you can see here in this picture, which is called the Holocaust, there are some German Nazis who burned all these Jewish people. Very sad. Another one is the Zionism. Benjamin Ziv Herzl or Theodor Herzl was an Austro-Hungarian journalist, playwright, political activist, and a writer who founded the Zionism through the World Zionist Organization. So he promoted Jewish migration to Palestine in an effort to form a Jewish state in the Israel. So as you can see here, people support Zionism. They have the flags of the Israel. Another on 14 May 1948, we have here David Ben Gurion, the executive head of the Zionist organization and the president of the Jewish Agency for Palestine, that declared the establishment of the Jewish state in Eretz Israel to be known as the State of Israel. However, at the present times, the State of Israel, despite being one of the United Nations member state, is embroiled in sovereignty dispute since it is not recognized as a state by 32 member countries of the United Nations. So isa din dito siya na issue in the Judaism in which and the country Israel na hindi siya piniyagan ng United Nations. So, yun nga. So, isa sa mga head ng Zionist organization na president sa Jewish Agency, that David Ben Gurion experienced this issue about their religion, which is the Judaism. Okay, that's a wrap for our discussion about Judaism. So I hope you learned something, and you may also read or study about Judaism from the Creeper information or the Google website. So thank you guys for listening. Have a good day. Bye bye.